What's up, everybody? It's Polish Pete. I'm here in the Buzz Studios in Baxter, Minnesota, and I'm joined today by my good friend, Bill Schoepke.
How you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for coming in. A lot of us anglers know, if you've been paying attention, that one of the species and categories of anglers that is leading the way as far as new techniques and leading the way as far as technology goes in fishing has been crappie anglers. Certainly the tournament crappie anglers were ahead of the game when it came to the craze in live scope, when it came to just fishing artificials in general and having more success than even with live bait in some situations. And Bill here is one of the people that I know in my circle is at the forefront of a lot of this cool stuff going on in the crappie industry. So I wanted to bring him in because he's got a great background. We've known each other for a long time. He's worn a lot of hats in the fishing industry just like me. First, I want to get a little background from Bill here. So Bill, tell us a little bit about how you found yourself working with 1Standard.
Well, I worked at Gator Mountain for 24 years and chased a lot of the products and bought everything that was out there. And I had an opportunity when Gander changed to move career paths and became a sales rep for a company that sold plastic baits, but they were also on the side the largest plastic manufacturer in the U.S.
Yeah, so you saw both halves, not only just how they worked, but also the manufacturing process, PD process, all that.
Yeah, which was really, really cool. So even though I thought I had a career in selling baits, it kind of got interesting to watch and see all of the product and development and the sales fads from all brands.
Oh, that process is cool, seeing that whole PD process. And where in the country were you based out of? I know you're a Wisconsin guy, but did you do most of your fishing in the Midwest?
Yeah, I was Midwest. My wife, when she went to school, was in the Twin Cities, so I fished a lot in Minnesota and so forth. And I worked in Minnesota for 10 or 12 years, and anytime you had a chance to fish, you did. So kind of familiar with the northern Midwest.
Gotcha. I get pigeonholed a lot as a bass angler. I'm a wannabe multi-species angler. I try and do it as much as I can for fun, destination fishing, things like that. How about yourself? Where did you kind of find yourself getting pigeonholed into one species, or are you kind of all across the board?
No, I'm all across the board. When I was younger, my heart was really into muskie fishing, chased a lot of muskies, and then I decided I wanted to catch more fish.
Yeah.
So I kind of the seasonality and chased a lot of them. So I went from crappies, bluegills, smallmouth, largemouth, and you always end up back on some muskies in the fall for sure.
That's cool. Pan fishing. Did you grow up pan fishing at all? Have you done a lot? Do you have an extensive background in it at all?
I did. My grandfather and my dad was my influences as most of us for fishing, and I remember my dad telling me years ago, boy, you could take me and catch 5 walleyes or 25 crappies, and I'll take them 25 crappies every day of the week. So we caught a lot of crappies, fished a lot of brush piles, and growing up as a kid with my grandpa, we'd take a 12-foot rowboat into a bunch of backwoods lakes and row around and just cast at trees, fish some lily pads and things like that. But we'd drive Grandma crazy once in a while. That old station wagon would get stuck in the woods now and again trying to get back out, but that was the enjoyable part.
That's awesome. I didn't get the exposure to the Midwest angling until I got a little bit older. I grew up out on the East Coast, and when I moved to Minnesota, I quickly got enamored with the whole culture, the fishing culture in the Midwest, and did a lot of walleye fishing early on. And for me, crappie fishing or pan fishing was just a spring activity. It was this couple-week window where I was good enough to actually catch them when they were basically in a foot of water or less. And if they weren't there, I was really clueless to how to catch them. So what are some of the techniques and things that you found yourself doing back then that may have evolved now?
That's kind of where the crappie industry was for the most part. I mean, all of us would love, whether you went with young kids or your spouses or whatever, put a minnow on a bobber and cast it out by that tree off, that pine tree that fell in the water, and you'd catch a crappie. And for the most part, that was great. But come the middle of May or first part of June, we all transitioned, started fishing other things, and that's kind of when we went to the drawing board to come up with something. That's kind of where 1Standard evolved. How do you catch them the other 8-9 months out of the year? And the evolution of electronics has really opened that up to to a lot of opportunity.
That led me right into exactly what I wanted to ask you. How does a guy like you from the Midwest there ending up working with a company like 1Standard? It's on sort of like, I know your guys' background, so I'm close to it, and I'm excited to see what's all coming down the road. I know we're just scratching the surface with what the stuff that's come out from 1Standard, but I've recently fished with the baits. Thank you, got them in my hands, and it's excited us around here because we've seen the success with it already. But how did you end up becoming a part of that 1Standard team?
Well, when I left Gander, I started as a sales rep position in this area, and the gentleman that I went to work for was a big part of that manufacturing facility. And when things change paths, if you will, as life always does for you, it opens up other opportunities. And with, realistically 30 years of retail experience, and he had 30 years in sales and manufacturing experience, and we work with another gentleman, Jeremy Lawyer from South, and he's been in the bass industry for pretty near 30 years as well. And the knowledge of things that all of us have seen, we felt we could come up with something very special, very unique, and we wanted to be on the forefront and more of trend setting than a follower and a chaser. And that's what we've tried to do. We have 1Standard in mind, and that's the fish better. We want, when you use our products, we want you to have the confidence to do so. And I think one of the neatest things was one of the first fish you caught on. It was like a 15 and a quarter inch crappie.
Right,
so I mean, we got a text right away. The weather didn't look the best,
No.
but your confidence was there.
It was. I can't tell you. It's being a bass angler myself. Like I said, I get pigeonholed as a bass angler quite a bit. I'm a tackle junkie, and I love the details and things. And the Minnow One, the initial shape you guys came out with, I right away noticed, there's more detail in that plastic than traditionally comes in a crappie or panfish plastic. More attention to detail there with the tail the way it is, the split tail, and then having the articulated kind of back end of the minnow itself. And you were kind of touching on how flat the back is and the meat in the body and just all the thought that went into that process. Well, I can tell you one thing. They show up really well on your screen. They're really easy to keep at depth, and fish bite them. I was really impressed with the plastic, but to me, obviously you started off with that one shape, but there were like 5 jig heads in the family. And, initially when I heard of 1Standard, my thought was, the Southern tournament crappie angler. That's what came to my mind, just thinking you guys were going to target that angler that was a lot more hardcore, that's looking for a lot more detailed stuff and certain techniques that maybe would shine in southern reservoirs. But what I learned real quick was it works really well in our neck of the woods as well, up here in the Midwest and our natural lakes. So can you take us through a couple of the jig heads that you found confidence in, or maybe some of the techniques that you found having success up in our neck of the woods with?
Yeah, the bait head's kind of our staple. It's a flatter style head for better reflection on forward-facing sonars. But the other part of it is on plastics. If you're using a traditional round head, perhaps with a lead barb, it kind of rips the nose out after maybe not even a fish or two, just rigging the bait. So we put a wire keeper on that. We wanted that wire keeper to be a little bit longer, so it was pushed back into the bait to help hold a little bit more of the meat of to keep it in place. But the big thing is it has a real lifelike eye on it. We've through the years, whether you're a walleye angler, muskie angler, or something, you always wanted something for that fish to focus on. So we were able to enlarge the eye on a jig head, which with that shape, cosmetically that it looks really good on the bait. We also built the jig head around the Minnow One as well. So the bait head was created after the body. So we worked so it was a system or a product that married each other very, very well. The functionality aspect of it is that bait really pendulums well. So, and when you're reeling it in or you're bringing it on a scope and see where that brush pile is or see where that suspended crappie is, if you kill it, it really pendulums and swings straight in. It doesn't have that roll or wobble, or if you hop it just a little bit, sometimes with those round heads, it wants to give a unnatural appearance, and that jig head really tracks well in a smaller profile.
That's really cool. That one I had a lot of success on right away myself. The thing that was intriguing to me and some of the other heads there was, like that stacker head. Now, where I was fishing at the time, I didn't even realize it was definitely, I could have used it for what it was intended purpose was to stack multiple presentations on one line. I was just using it as a delivery method at the time, and it actually worked really well. But that particular jig head, I was using similar to a walleye jig head, getting a little bit more bottom contact, dropping it down, fishing a little bit more vertical with that jig head in particular. But that stacker head, that really, to me, seemed like something that if I was going to Wisconsin or back up to Canada, what a unique way. I didn't even realize that there's such a slick system there to stack up multiple presentations there like that. And what I wanted to touch on with that one was the hook in it too. That sickle style hook definitely seems to pin them up a lot better. If you high stick them like I tend to do quite a bit, you still get a lot of meat in the gap there, the hook.
Yeah, with that gap of the hook or a sickle style hook, the crappie industry is really gravitated towards that. So we offer that in several of our heads. The stacker aspect, the way that came into play is traditionally, if you used a standard jig head, you would tie pretty much to the same eyes. So that top jig, when you had your top and bottom, that top jig would lay to the side or not natural or horizontal, perfectly horizontal in the water. So by offering that eye on the bottom and tying your dropper or your second bait with perhaps about a foot of line on it, both it's like synchronized swimming. They both act the same.
That's cool.
And what's really interesting about it is the lifelike appearance of both. And what you don't think about is when you had the traditional style of tying a slip knot on the top or to one eye, you really have opportunity for knot failure. Well, by having three eyes basically now, you have the same knot strength in all three spots, so you don't have a weak point. So it was important for that. And what was really interesting is, we built it for crappies, but the white bass are aggressive, and all of us don't pass them up when you get a chance on an active school, and we've doubled up on a lot of white bass with it, and it's been very productive with that too.
Yeah, I can tell you some of the walleye anglers around here right away had their eyes on that whole system and thinking about how well that would work on some of the rivers and places where we're close enough to be able to do that. But probably one of the things that was most intriguing to me when I was looking at the different style jig heads too is that dock shooter jig. I'm familiar with dock shooting. If you're up in our neck of the woods here, that's typically not something a lot of panfish anglers do. As a bass angler, we're used to firing jigs in places we probably shouldn't have quite a bit on people's docks, and I'm used to that knowing that there's fish underneath there. But pan fishing, I've never had the confidence with a spinning rod and that light tackle to kind of fire a bait in there. And certainly, as you mentioned earlier, the way crappie plastics on a jig, I typically, if I were to pull on that plastic, I just blow the nose of that plastic out almost immediately. I know you've had a chance, and I'm jealous. You've had a chance to fish with Jeremy Lawyer, as a friend of both of ours, incredible angler. Your boss actually refers to him as the ultimate outdoorsman, the man that lives off the land.
Yes, sir.
Really impressed by a lot of that guy's outdoor acumen. But the dock shooting thing, have you been able to actually implement that anywhere up north? Or I'm not confident yet enough to really grab on a little jig like that and fire it under a dock, but how about yourself?
Well, last week I got to fish on Grand with Jeremy for a while, and we did some dock shooting. And I'd like to say I'm a fair to a little bit above fair angler, and I'll tell you what, I got humbled very quickly last week. It was challenging to say the least. So I did put it on my calendar from 1 to 3 on Tuesdays to practice shooting at a 5-gallon bucket for a couple weeks before I go back down with them. But no, what's really interesting is, we talked about the bait head and the wire keeper and how we made the bait so it would hold a little bit better. When you start skipping and shooting under docks, even the extra effort we put into that product, it still would pull down. And there's nothing more frustrating than, in my situation, taking 5 or 6 times to shoot it in a spot the size of a pop can, and when you don't get a bite and you bring the bait back in and it's pulled down. It's frustrating because it takes a little bit to get it there and some practice, where that dock shooter has that keeper on there, and when you corkscrew that keeper in there, I mean, it doesn't come off. And in the panfish industry, there's really not a lot on the market that offers that. And it stays in place, and it's fantastic. On a side note, I've used that jig head a little bit fishing some weed edges, up here, and that that cabbage edge, and when you're dropping into pockets and stuff, and man, it keeps the body in place. So very beneficial with that.
Yeah, there's that argument between a lot of anglers right now whether they want that, obviously the durability and the amount of fish you get out of a TPE style plastic, that stretchy style plastic, but it's harder to rig, and a lot of people feel the traditional plastics are a little bit better getting bit or them hanging on to it longer. There's an argument there both ways. It's really cool if you take the time when you're rigging that to deal with that corkscrew style keeper, how long and how many fish you can get out of traditional soft plastic.
Yeah, and don't be intimidated with it if you've never had one. I've watched people, or they try to push it on right away, and it's really not hard to rig. There's a trick to it. You put it on, you give a little push, and you start to turn, and it automatically screws on. You just keep turning it. The tail goes past the barb of the hook all the time. 3-4 twists, it lines up, it's straight, and it's there for your live well to fill up.
Yep, it's a slick way to do things.
And then we have the hair jig.
The hair jig,
Absolutely. And what's really, really neat about that hair jig is when you look at the head, it actually has a fin or a chrome. It has a lifelike profile, if you will. And again, it gives you an opportunity to get great return from your sonar, but it also gives you that profile. And if you look closely at it, we really, another thing that we did was tuck the eye underneath that chrome, so we're protecting our knot and so forth on some of that lighter line stuff, and it just kind of blends in and looks realistic, if you will, with the marabou and mylar tails and so forth.
Yeah, that jig does look really incredible underwater. I did some underwater stuff with that jig in particular and got a bite on it right away while we were doing the underwater stuff, because it does look incredible. It has a lifelike action swim to it. Any of this stuff, are you tempted to throw a little bit of live bait on there in conjunction with the plastics?
You do whatever you got to do to catch fish.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. We did a couple of studies and some tests last week down on Grand with live bait. We fished them live bait on the stackers, ran some minnow heads on there, and ran the Minnow One down below. There's going to be some interesting stuff coming on that. The outcome was quite surprising, to say the least. But no, you certainly can. You do what you got to do in the situation. What's been incredible is the amount of fish that we've caught on the Minnow One, where you traditionally think, boy, I need to have, there's a cold front or the wind's blowing, or it's just, I need live bait to catch fish. And the amount of fish we've caught on that without adding any scent, the action's taking care of it. It really does work. We haven't had to add to that.
Well, I'm excited, and the reason why I am excited is having a little bit of knowledge of what's going on there. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with next. Any teases, anything you can give us, any direction you think you're going with the brand? Obviously, don't need any details on the exact products, but are we expanding into more plastics? Obviously, the one shape of that Minnow One has been a home run, so I'm hoping you guys give us some more options as well. And one thing I noticed, like you said, you guys clearly did work in conjunction with the jig heads with the Minnow One. So if you did more plastics, would you do more jigs as well?
Yeah, there's a lot in the pipeline. Realistically, we behind the scenes have worked on this for a year and a half, almost 2 years, which is kind of neat. In today's world, everybody's quick to bring something to the market and get it going, and we wanted to make sure that the fish spoke, that it worked. And we have several product lines that are coming. We're going to release throughout the year. We fished 2 or 3 products last week that we're pretty confident is fine-tuned and good to go. An interesting aspect talking about that is Jeremy is a perfectionist when it comes to action, and I mean the amount of pictures that he said, hey, this one works, but look at, you can't see the jig head, or they're choking on this one. So we've tweaked things. That Minnow One, there's a half a dozen different sizes of that between 2 or 1.5 and 2.5 inches to tweak it to get it just right. So we've really fine-tune something, get it where it is, and then we find out, can we make it just a little bit better before we bring it to you guys? And there's a lot in the works. I'm excited about it. It's hard to have something that works really, really well and keeping it quiet. For sure.
Well, I tried, guys. I wanted to get a little bit more detail in there because I'm definitely excited. I'm on board for this one because this these products have made me a crappie angler outside of that 2-week window I talked about when I caught them as a kid. So thanks for including us on this journey here with 1Standard, and stay tuned, folks, for all the new stuff coming from 1Standard.